Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Game, presented by Tunnel Vision Sports. I'm your host, Stephen Hayes, and today our guest is Motez Bishara. Motez, how you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
You know what? I want to redo the award-winning author, Motez Bishara. I don't want to short you on any way. I want to put the proper respect on your name. How are you doing today?
Thanks very much. That's very kind of you, Stephen. I'm very good. I'm here in London. It's gotten a bit warmer these days, so all good here.
What is the current weather in London?
It's probably about 50 degrees, so it's not too bad. Okay. But we had a nice weekend, so I can't complain.
Well, I'm here in Michigan, and I believe right now it's like 38. So
oh god,
we're supposed to be in spring, so I'll take the 50 any day of the week.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you joining us today, man. I read a nice amount about you, looked at a nice amount about you, and I was telling you honestly off camera, like I really feel like thus far you've lived an amazing life. So, I want to just start by, the beginning. I want to start with the beginning and give our viewers a little bit about yourself and go into your background and how you became the person you are today.
Thanks very much. So I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Manhattan in the 70s during the heyday of the Yankees. And everybody in my school loved the Yankees, so I just became a big baseball fan, pretty obsessive baseball fan when I was a kid. And later branched on into following the NBA and, especially Celtics-Lakers rivalry and NFL. I've always been a New York Giants fan my whole life. So I grew up in New York because my dad was a diplomat, and I'm originally from Kuwait. That's where my parents are from. That's where I was born, and we moved back there in the 80s, and I went to high school there. Played a little bit of high school basketball, JV and varsity, but never really had the athleticism or the talent to go to the next level. I also played in the high school band. I was a trumpet player growing up, so I could read sheet music, and I think I started when I was 10 and continued till I was about 15 or 16. So I played music, I played sports, but I didn't really have the aspiration to go the next level with music. I didn't have that hunger, and I certainly didn't have the athleticism to become a college athlete. So later on, I went to, after graduating from high school in Kuwait at the American School of Kuwait, I went to college in Boston. I went to Boston University. And I remember my first year there, I was watching an NBA game. I was NBA obsessive at that point. And there was a player named Wayman Tisdale. He was University of Oklahoma All-American. And then I think he played for the Sacramento Kings. It's probably before your time, Stephen. And he played for.
I know the person, but it definitely was before my. But I definitely know the person.
Yeah, I think he was he played with Charles Barkley when the Suns went to the finals. So he was a very, very good player. I think he averaged 20 and 10 one season. And I remember the announcer here saying that Wayman was also a bass player, like a bassist, like a jazz bassist. He had his own band. Right. And he was professional, he wasn't just sort of fiddling around in his basement. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. I was like, well, how can somebody be so proficient in music and also have the time to be so proficient in a major sport,
right?
Be one of the best players in the world. And to me, that was kind of like a double dream, And then a couple of years later, Bernie Williams joined the Yankees. And I remember again hearing the announcer say, Bernie Williams is a terrific jazz guitarist, and he's released an album. He eventually was nominated for a Latin Grammy, and being a diehard Yankees fan, I became a huge Bernie Williams fan. Of course, Bernie was instrumental in the Yankees winning 4 World Series.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I started to kind of, at that point, I was sort of dabbling in journalism here and there, coming up with different ideas for stories and ideas for books. And I had it in the back of my mind that it'd be cool to kind of compile a list of women and men who were proficient at sports and music on a level higher than just kind of recreational. I was recreational in both, and I just couldn't imagine being a professional on those scales. They're two
Right.
very, very competitive areas. So that's where I got
Absolutely.
the idea for Athletes Who Rock, and to eventually write a book about it.
And before we get more into your book, Athletes Who Rock, I wanted to go back a little bit. I am a diehard Yankees fan.
Oh, cool.
Um, I'm in my 30s now, but I'm a diehard Yankees fan. I've been a Yankees fan probably since my early teenage years, but to this day, diehard Yankee fan.
All right.
And I think one of the things about your book that amazes me is the way you combine, like you were talking about William Tisdale, you were talking about Bernie Williams, like you found ways to combine the uniqueness of what they do in their respective field of sports versus what else they're great at, right? Which
Hmm.
hence the title Athletes Who Rock. And two things that stand out to me are music and sports. These are two things that you don't have to know. You can go to a concert, you don't have to know the person next to you on your left or your right, or you can go to a sporting event, you don't have to know the person next to you, left or right, and you can literally be high-fiving, hugging, everything that you want. If you're on the same page with this is your favorite song, this is that person's favorite song, or if this is your favorite team and this is that person's favorite team, like it just brings people together. So now that you put out this book, Athletes Who Rock, and obviously you have some great names, some great athletes, but great in other areas as well. What gave you, I would say, the motivation to put this book out? What gave you the motivation to put this out and to say, because I know, I'm not a writer, but I know
Sure.
it was some hard times there to get this off the ground. So what pushed you to keep this going, to get this off the ground?
Yeah. Well, so before I start with that story, I just wanted to continue with what you were saying
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, go
about
ahead.
no, that's all right, about the dynamics of being successful in music and in sports, because not only from a fan point of view is it a great unifier, because as you said, you could go into any sporting arena or any sports bar and sit there, and there would be a person to your left and right, and all of a sudden you start having a conversation, and you guys are having a drink, and you're talking all night just because of your collective interest in sports.
Right,
Or it could be in music as well if you're out seeing
right.
a live band. But also for the participants, it's a great equalizer, because uh, being of an ethnic minority background, or being poor, or growing up struggling financially, does not appear to be a major inhibitor to become successful in these fields. Uh,
Of course. Yes.
a great number of athletes come from pretty modest backgrounds, and same with musicians. It's almost a rite of passage for a musician to struggle and be like a starving artist for a while, to wait
Yes.
tables and whatnot, or do open mics, or do low paying gigs before you really explode. I think even Ed Sheeran was busking on the street. They call it busking here, but peddling his music on the street
Oh, okay.
for coins and stuff, before he really exploded and made it big. So for me, that is one other phenomenal dynamic of music and sports, is that they are the great equalizer as well, in terms of not having that glass ceiling above you. Not to the same degree, certainly, as the corporate world does, or in politics, or in other walks of life. So that's also what attracted me to these fields. Now, in terms of what made me persevere, I guess I'm just one of those people, for better or for worse, that just has to finish something when they start it. So I had the idea of it. I was freelancing at CNN, and I was sort of kicking the idea around over there to interview some prominent athlete musicians, and it kind of was bubbling, but it never really got off the ground to do kind of a series of articles on athlete
Mhm.
musicians. And then at the same time, I got approached by a literary agent who asked me. He had seen my first book, Beating the NBA, where I talk about haggling with ticket scalpers outside all the NBA arenas. I flew to all the NBA cities, showed up on game day, and kind of haggled my way in there and tried to get cheap tickets. So that was pretty fun. And I guess he saw that and some of the other work I had done. And he asked me if I had any other ideas for books, and I said, "Well, actually, I have this idea I've kind of been kicking around, And he's like, "Well, I think that's a good idea. Why don't you put it together in a proposal?" And
Hmm.
so I did that, and it wasn't like I got a book deal off the bat. We had to put it on a kind of a crowd funding kind of platform. I had to sell pre-orders of the books,
Oh, okay.
but it got me started. It gave me the impetus to start on the project, and so I interviewed an ex soccer player here in London named Pat Nevin. He was a big player for Chelsea in the 80s, and he played until the 90s. And he's also a big DJ, not like hip hop DJ, but he's into like indie music, stuff that
Okay.
was really big in the 80s, 90s, and then still carries on
Right.
to this day. But it's a very kind of niche kind of music market. I guess the Smiths and that kind of stuff would be in that mold. And so he was an amazing guy. He gave me a lot of access for a few hours. We had a good chat. I took some pictures because I'm into photography as well, so I got some pictures of him. And then once I got started on that, I touched base with a few other athlete musicians, and started getting in touch with different sports teams, and trying to get some of the bigger names, and it just snowballed from there. And then when I was about, I guess, a third of the way through, about 5 or 6 names in, I just thought, well, I got to do this now. There's
Right.
no going back. I've already taken a lot of these amazing people's times, and I've got to finish what I start. So I
Right.
kept on going. It took 4 years, but I made it work. And on the way, I interviewed Bernie Williams, which was fantastic. So I thought the book would not be complete without Bernie. Sadly, Wayman Tisdale passed away a few years
Yes.
back. I think he had cancer, so he had a very sad early departure. But there are so many phenomenal athlete musicians in this, that I was just very fortunate. Ronnie Cycli, former NBA player with the Miami Heat. He was the very first draft pick of the Miami Heat, in fact. He's a big time house music DJ, so I was able to spend time with him as well. Yannick Noah, the tennis great, tennis Hall
Hmm.
of Famer, father of
Absolutely.
Joachim Noah. He's a huge pop singer in France and all the French-speaking countries, and he's a tennis legend, and also a legendary tennis coach in France. He's coached their men's and women's national teams to Davis Cup and Fed Cup victories. So just a phenomenal human being all around. And yeah, I was just very fortunate to get all these people, and it just shows. Just keep persevering, and you'll get there in the end.
Absolutely. And I thank you for that background. And I wanted to ask you, with this experience, now you said you've done freelance for CNN. You've also done it for ESPN and The Guardian, correct?
Yes.
What did you find being a journalist? What did you find the difference in being a journalist and being an author? Like, did you find that they kind of meet in the middle, or did you feel like there was a whole new transformation for you when you decided you were going to do this book?
So it's funny because I wrote my first book before I got a lot of freelance work with the
Okay.
likes of CNN, ESPN, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, and a few others. Um, and so my experience writing my first book and second book were a little bit different, partially because I didn't have a lot of expectation with the first book.
Okay.
I didn't have a publisher. I just went out and kind of did it,
Right.
and I didn't have like a huge platform on social media or whatnot. In fact, when I wrote it in 2013, social media wasn't really what it is today.
Right. Right. It hadn't
Um,
even kicked off yet like it is
y-
now.
yeah, exactly. I mean, there was Facebook and Twitter and stuff, but it wasn't really, it wasn't like a requirement that all authors
Right.
had to have this big social media
Right.
thing. So it was met well with critical reception, but it was kind of a modest release, if you will. And
Okay.
then, I began working a lot for CNN, especially as sort of a regular freelancer. I was in the newsroom for 4 or 5 years solid. And I guess the big difference between writing that and this book, Athletes Who Rock, and working with the likes of CNN is, with CNN, once you write something, it kind of goes into this big kind of, big machinery cog that just puts it out and then the world reads it. Whereas
Hmm.
when you're writing a book, even if you're kind of a major author, you've got to do a hell of a lot of work to get people out there to read it. There's a lot of promotion you've got to do. There's a lot of, getting in touch with people and trying to get, the book in bookstores and all of that stuff. You really have to do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to pushing that out and getting it read. You
Right.
know, there's some of that with freelancing for news groups, but by and large, if you're working for any of the major news outlets or even some of the sort of medium tier, a lot of people are just going to read it, and if you've got good ideas, it's going to get published and it's going to get read. So I think that's kind of the big difference for me, in my experience, is that when you're freelancing and you're writing something for a news organization, you kind of write it, file it to your editor, and most of the work gets done from there. But with writing this book especially, I had input in everything, the layout,
Hmm.
the photography, the everything, the fonts,
Oh, wow.
yeah, you name it, and I did a lot of the photography, but even the photography that I didn't do. So this is former Red Sox and Cincinnati Reds pitcher Bronson Arroyo. I
Okay.
took this photo, and I took, I'd say, a good 15 to 20 of the photos in here. But even the photos that I didn't take, like this one of Bernie Williams, you gotta sort of chase the right people, whether it's a
Right.
publicist or whatnot, to get
Right.
the photos and get them used, or you work with other photographers and you have to pay them for their work, or you go through photo banks. So it's a big tiring process, but it's very rewarding in the end.
Now, with this book, Athletes Who Rock, was this something that you wanted to do, and this was like the end of that saga, or is this something that you want to continue and continue to shine light on athletes who have other talents outside of what their respective sports are?
I'm always a proponent of athletes who do things off the field, like I like to shine a light on that 100%. So I'll give you an example. There was an offensive lineman with the Kansas City Chiefs in the NFL, and he was also a medical doctor. He had just gotten his medical degree. His name is Laurent Duvernay Tardif. He's Canadian, and he
Yes,
won.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, he was the starting offensive lineman in the Super Bowl. I think he was the right guard, and he actually took the next year off because of COVID. He wanted to help with
Yep.
COVID research. I don't think he played this year as well, but hopefully he'll be coming back. But to me, when I went to the Chargers Chiefs game a few seasons ago, it's the opening game of the 2019 season, I think it was. Uh, he was the one guy I wanted to speak to
Hmm.
because of his efforts off the field, and it was just fascinating for me.
Right.
And it's the same also with racial justice and social protests in sport. I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer of using your platform, whether you're an artist or musician or athlete, to fight for justice, social justice of all kinds. And that comes up a lot in Athletes Who Rock as well. The last 5 interviews really came after the George Floyd
Oh,
situation,
wow. Okay.
after that tragedy. And so I was able to speak to former WNBA player. I think she's a free agent now looking for a team, but she's played 14 or 15 seasons. This is Essence Carson, of
Yes.
yes, a former New York Liberty and of the Sparks. And she won a NBA championship. She played at Rutgers, and she studied music and psychology at Rutgers too. But she has been a proponent of social justice in sports since she was at Rutgers, and had a negative incident with a radio shock jock, Don Imus, who
Yep.
said some very
Remember
insensitive
that
things
vividly.
about the team.
Yep.
Yeah, she was actually, and I didn't know this until I interviewed her. She was basically the spokesperson for the team, for the players on the team, as a
Oh, okay.
20-year-old kid. Yeah, yeah. So she said I wasn't even like a fully formed adult yet, and I was having to fight out against racial injustice back then. And that continued into the WNBA, and her teammates for I think it was the Sparks when they were playing Minnesota and they were defending their title. I think it was in I want to say 2017 or 2018, and they walked off the field during the national anthem. This is right after the Colin
Hmm.
Kaepernick thing. So we spoke about that, about the George Floyd situation during our interview. Same with Yannick Noah, and same, of course, with Damian Lillard of the Portland Trailblazers.
Right.
He's a big proponent as well. He was one of the
Absolutely.
leading voices when the NBA basically had a walkout during that incident in the bubble, when that gentleman got shot out in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Yes.
Yes, and they decided not to play, and so it was really fascinating to get an insider's account of what happened there.
And Martez, I really want to commend you, because you're doing great work. I'm not saying what your plan is, and I would hope that these books continue.
Thank
I
you.
really do, because the way you're shining this light and it's showing how you have to be so focused and so honed in on becoming an athlete, especially at any level, but at the professional level, to make it to the professional level, that takes up all of your time. That takes up so much sacrifice. It makes so much of what you do is the reason why you're great. A lot of people sometimes bash athletes, and you might hear them say, "Oh, this person can't play." This is a professional athlete. I don't care how you slice it. I don't care how you look at it. This person is good enough to be in the NBA, the NFL, the WNBA, the NHL, wherever you want to put them at. They're there for a reason. So for you to sit there and say, "Okay, we know what it took to get you here, but let's shine that light on, what you're doing here." And whatever the case may be, whether you're a doctor or a musician or whatever you are.
Yeah.
I just think you shining that light is such an amazing thing. And I would hope that, the Athletes Who Rock continues, because I think nowadays players are finding that voice, I guess you could say, to want to do other things. You have players who are, turning into full media personalities, when they retire or currently. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors struck a deal of the first of his kind to be an active player and still be a media member with Turner Sports, which is an amazing feat. So, that things like that is great. And what you're doing is such a great thing, because it's helping. What we do is we help the younger generation understand you don't have to be an athlete to be great. You don't have to be an athlete to become a success. You don't have to become an athlete to be rich. While it is great, and while it is a rewarding sport and it's a rewarding life, you're showing that these athletes they're not just an athlete. They don't just have that in their repertoire. And I think what you're doing is an amazing thing. If you can you show the front cover of your book? There we go.
So
there we go.
Yeah, I worked with the graphic designer, and we decided, we should really put all these amazing athletes on the cover there.
It's an amazing cover, and I see you still kept the record.
Yeah,
the Rock.
Excellent. That's it. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's available on Amazon or all major book distribution sellers. All major booksellers. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any further questions you have about the any of the players or
Yeah.
Anything
So
else?
for
Yeah.
you, what was your? I'm not going to say favorite, but I know the Bernie Williams. But what was the one that you felt like? I know you said Bernie completed it for you, and I know you felt like
Yeah.
he had to be in there. But what interview that you did that you felt like, okay, there's no way I can stop now? Like, at what point did you realize, you know what, there's no way I can stop now? I have to get this out.
Yeah, there's a few others. I think so it's kind of obvious when I'm speaking to like Bernie Williams or NBA superstar Ronnie Cycli, or obviously Dame was my last one. He was the 15th one. But they were sort of guys who were more under the radar. The legendary skateboarder Ray Barbee. Okay.
Okay.
Now I'm not a big skateboarding guy.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
I became very, very interested in skateboarding after. But Ray Barbee, grew up in Northern California,
Okay.
and he started street skating in the kind of the late '80s. And he's also an incredible guitarist. So this is Barbie. I think
Okay.
around
That's a really cool photo.
1989, doing a shot. Yeah, it was tough to source that one. That's when he was young. And he went through a really interesting dynamic, being someone who's a black skater from Northern California, listening to punk rock and playing punk rock in bands, and the dynamics of being a black individual in that kind of a sport, in that kind of a crowd, was interesting to hear about. So he was told me about the tension he felt from his own community, not from the skateboarder community, because the skateboarder community was very inclusive, the way he described it.
Right.
But he got some flack from other people in his community or on his street, saying, why are you trying to be white? Why are you skateboarding? Why are you wearing those
Right.
kinds of clothes? Why are you playing guitar? Why are you listening to that kind of music? So that was very interesting for me to see how he faced that kind of thing. And he just dove headfirst into street skating. He got a contract while he was still in high school. He got a skateboard with his graphic on the back of it. And then he got in a few of those videos. The main one was called Public Domain.
Okay.
And it was created by like the major skaters at that time, the Bones Brigade. So he became this huge international star. And to this day, Ray Barbee is like a massive star in Japan. He plays gigs there. He's been there like 10 or 12 times. People come up after the gigs with skateboards for him to sign and stuff. There's a big skating community out there, and jazz community. So it was super interesting to hear that. And he, of course, he did go to some gigs, one gig in particular where he faced a life threatening situation, really, where there were skinheads at the gig. He didn't know that was going to happen. The gig got broken up, and it was just like a complete mess. And he was basically, in a very, very dangerous situation. So to hear him talk not just about his incredible love of skateboarding and how that's changed his life, and photography, because he's an amazing photographer, and music, but also, the things that he had to overcome in life to get where he is now. So a lot of this is also about obstacles that these men and women have faced. There was another one with cricket player Mark Butcher, who is he's a mixed race individual. His mom is from Jamaican background. His dad was a white English cricket player.
Okay.
So he became one of the best cricket players in England. He played for England. He played in the big tournaments representing England. And interestingly, he said that he hadn't faced the same racial pressures that perhaps somebody who was fully of African British descent would have faced, and didn't really realize it at the time. And Mark is he's a wonderful guy and a really great musician, and also a very deep, complex person, because we went through a lot of stories of things that he had to face, personal things in his life, injuries he faced that created, personal things in his personal life at home that created depression and alcoholism in his life and how he overcame that to resurrect his career. So it was very, very fascinating. These are two extremely, very, very deep conversations that we had in this book that, if you're kind of the casual sports fan, you wouldn't know who they are. But once you open the
Right.
book, you'd be like, oh, wow, I never
Right.
knew about this person and this incredible story they faced. One more would be Kyle Turley, former NFL offensive lineman
Offensive,
with,
I was gonna say offensive
yeah,
lineman. Yeah.
and he played for the New Orleans Saints. I think he was with the Chiefs for a year. He's with the St. Louis Rams at the time. And Turley had a lot of head injuries from the NFL that
Okay.
also created a lot of mental health issues for him. He moved to Nashville after his career ended, and he became kind of he had two bands. He had a country music band and he had a death metal band. And he was touring, and that helped structure his life and help him gain a lot of the confidence that he lost after his career in the NFL ended because of injuries. So
And
yeah.
again, I commend you. I think this is amazing. And before, I want you to please share again where you can find your book.
Oh, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, any of the major booksellers online, they'll all have them.
So every
At-
guest that I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, Athletes Who Rock.
Athletes Who Rock. Athletes Who Rock.
Yes.
Check it out. It's an
Stories
amazing
of
book.
sacrifice, setbacks, and success in sports, music, and life. It's a long subtitle, but a very descriptive one.
And I think when people get a chance, if they take the time to sit down and read it, they'll enjoy it, because it's not just about an athlete, like you said, it's about obstacles, overcoming adversity, everything compiled into one. And I think you did a tremendous job of putting this out. Now, before all of my guests leave the show, I always ask them to leave a word of encouragement. But today I'm going to do something different. I'm going to ask you to leave two separate, because I would like for you to leave words of encouragement just to the younger generation. And if they go hand in hand, that's fine. But also leave words of encouragement to up and coming authors.
Sure. It'd probably be similar words of encouragement, I
Okay,
guess.
that's fine as well.
Well, for the younger generation, so I've taught news writing to university students, and the main point that I want to get through to them is, you guys can all do this.
Mhm.
There is nothing, it's down to hard work. It's like playing an instrument, or learning how to hit a curveball in baseball. It's down to hard work. If you want to be a writer, you can absolutely be a writer. I was not a good writer in high school. I think I got a C in my senior year English class. I was by no means a good writer. My SAT scores in English were not phenomenal or anything. I think they were
Mhm.
pretty average. But for whatever reason, I loved writing, and I loved writing about sports and music and culture. And I just started coming up with ideas for stories, going out and getting in interviews and taking the initiative. And if you can get interviews and come up with good storylines, with whether they're athletes or musicians or anybody interesting in society, you're probably going to get that story published. So if that's the kind of thing you want to do, you can absolutely do it. There shouldn't be any obstacles in front of you. I didn't have contacts in journalism. I don't come from a family of journalists at all. It was just on my own initiative. I mean, it's the same if you want to be a musician. Just you got to work hard, and keep practicing piano or guitar or songwriting or singing, whatever it is. There's only about, I'd say, 0.1% of singers, maybe 0.5%, who are really natural born gifted singers, like a Whitney Houston or Stevie Wonder, or, Michael Jackson, or somebody like that. And I think 99.5% of the rest have to work at it, and singing is not something you would think does not come natural to people, but often it does not.
No, you have to work at singing. My mother is a gospel singer, and she's a musician. She learned how to play piano by ear when she was 3 years old.
Wow.
And she taught us to hold a tune, but it's nothing. It's not easy at all. Like you
No.
think just because you hear something on the radio and you're singing it, no, that's work. You have to really put the time and the effort into that.
That's what I mean. Exactly. So whether you're young, an aspiring middle schooler or a high school who wants to be a writer, or work on Wall Street or be a techie, you could do it. Just be passionate about it, and give it everything you've got, and you can do it. It sounds cliche, but when you're passionate about something, that's what drove all these 15 people to success in the Olympics, and in concerts, and releasing albums and stuff, and being all stars and NFL all pros, is their passion and dedication to what they do. And you can't really be bored with the process of doing it. I think Kobe said that too. You got to love the process. And he would get out
Absolutely.
there at 5:30 in the morning and shoot jumpers. Damian Lillard was like that too. He broke his leg junior year at Weber State. He never let go into Weber State or Weber State, spoil his dream of being in the NBA, even though they hadn't really had an NBA player before, or
Right.
not one for 25 years.
Right.
Nobody of his caliber. And he broke his leg and came back and was shooting jumpers, 400 jumpers a day from a chair. That's what he did to overcome that. And he's drafted number 6, and guess what? He was NBA Rookie of the Year above Anthony Davis his rookie season. So
And he's top NBA 75 players of all time now.
There you go. There you
So,
go. And this is a guy who his sophomore year of high school did not play a single minute at Alameda High School in Oakland. The coach benched him the entire season. And he told his
wow.
coach he wanted to play in the NBA, and the coach kind of laughed at him. And so rather than just sit there and take it and let the coach spoil his ambitions, he transferred to another high school and had good junior and senior seasons. Never got recruited by the North Carolinas or Dukes or anybody like that. It was all Montana State, Weber State, and look what he made of himself. So, I mean, he's a phenomenal example.
Absolutely.
And for authors, it's a similar kind of thing. If you want to write, you've gotta write and get better at writing, and join workshops, and learn from other writers. Read. That is probably my number one tip for writers, is you got to read a lot and learn how to write from other authors and other phenomenal writers, and that's where you get your chops and learn your rhythm and learn how to write properly and express yourself and find your voice. And if you want to be a journalist, find good stories. There's not a lot of ethnic minority people in newsrooms, and certainly very few editors, whether it's in Britain or in the US, and so if you have good stories and good interviews, it's very hard to turn down somebody who has a good, a good solid foundation of journalism and writing and a good story. So you'll get published.
Well, I thank you for those words of encouragement. And I hope everyone out here watching this will take heed to it if this is what you are inspiring to do. Because this man is an award-winning author, an amazing journalist. He has done it all. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I truly feel you have lived an amazing life thus far. Motez Bishara, we thank you for coming on Beyond the Game. We are hoping and wishing you all the success with Athletes Who Rock. And I'm pushing for Athletes Who Rock Part 2, or however you want to do it. But hopefully we can get that from you and then have you back on. So I appreciate you, my friend.
Absolutely. Thanks, Stephen. I'm going to plug one more thing before
Go
I
ahead,
go.
yeah. Go ahead.
I have an ebook that's out, which I released kind of in tandem with Athletes Who Rock, but it's not related. It is investigative journalism, because that's also what I do. And it is the story of Michael Jackson's life living in Bahrain after his court case. Yeah, he moved to Bahrain. He was invited by the Sheikh Abdullah of Bahrain, and he lived there for a year, kind of in transition, while he was kind of figuring out what his next steps would be. And he wanted to leave California and all that stuff behind him after he was acquitted of the trial. And he took his kids out there, and he was working on a comeback album. And there's, the music is in a vault somewhere, and I get to the bottom of where that music is and why it hasn't been released. and all the interesting things that happened to him out there that eventually led to him coming back to Las Vegas and then Los Angeles, where he sadly was
Right.
was rehearsing for the O2 shows, which never happened. But yeah, it's a very underreported, unknown part of his life. And I know a lot of people interested in his life would find this story fascinating. So that's called When the Sheikh Met the King, the complete oral history of Michael Jackson's remarkable year in Bahrain. And you can find that on Kindle. That's exclusively on Kindle.
Exclusively on Kindle. Thank you so much, Motez Bishara. Like I said, we appreciate you for coming on, and we hope to have you back. And I wish you nothing but the best. And again, thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, Stephen. You're doing great work. Thank you so much for having me.
This is Beyond the Game. We're out.